Not all marriages are perfect. While many vow to be there in sickness and in health, until death do them part, that vow can be broken. In this case, Lee Jennings not only broke that vow by cheating on her husband with his best friend, but she broke that vow by bringing about till death do them part when she horrifically murdered her husband. This is a case about disloyalty, disrespect, and a decision. Lee Jennings was a disloyal wife to the point of planning on leaving her husband, not just for some random guy, but for her husband's best friend, Jean. The only problem was money. She couldn't financially support herself without her husband, so she stayed with him. She was disrespectful to Elliot by cheating on him, by staying with him for money. In fact, she planned on having him pay for her son's college tuition. Elliot was going to pay for his stepchild's tuition. And Lee Jennings made a decision. She made a decision to stab her husband not once, not twice, but 8 times to tragically take his life. Good morning, members of the jury. My name is Jill Durso, and I represent the prosecution, the state. As I've already told you, this case before us deals with the tragic death of a young 50-year-old man. But before I tell you about that horrific incident, it's important to talk about how that night came to be. Almost 5 years ago, Lee met Elliot. Elliot was a frequent customer at the dry cleaners where Lee worked, and after a lot of visits, one day he got up the courage to ask her on a date. She said yes. After that, a whirlwind romance followed. They fell in love. Well, at least Elliot did. Just 3 months in, the couple decided to get married and start a life together. Elliot was happy to move in, to become a step-parent to Lee's only child who had never met their other biological parent. Elliot even supported all of them financially. Lee stopped working, and Elliot was happy to step in. Things stayed good for a while, until they weren't. Not all marriages are perfect, and unfortunately this one became turbulent. Lee became distant. Although she didn't have a job, Elliot was picking up most of the slack around the house. Despite coming home from work tired, he started to get annoyed, get angry, and the two started to fight about anything and everything. Well, none of us are perfect spouses, especially during an argument. Elliot never laid a hand on Lee, never got physical. But what did Lee do? Lee got physical with another man, with Elliot's best friend. Despite the turbulence, despite them trying to work through things, Lee still went running into the arms of another man. Lee fell in love with Jean, but she couldn't leave her husband. Her husband was her financial support. He was going to pay for her child's college. So she kept both men around, one for love and one for money. Fast forward to Elliot's birthday, and Lee wants to plan a party. No, she doesn't want to plan this party to celebrate Elliot's birthday. She wants to plan this party to spend more time with Jean, because if they're party planning together, it's an excuse to have some time together. And at the party, Lee decided she hadn't had enough of Jean yet. She slow danced with Jean at her husband's party in front of her husband. This understandably made him very angry, so Elliot confronted Jean. The two argued a bit, and then Jean apologized. Jean realized how much he valued his friendship with Elliot over his affair with Lee. In that moment, Elliot was picked over Lee. Lee was crushed. She realized she had lost her true love, Jean, and she went to take care of her husband. Upset at Jean, upset at her husband, she went and stabbed her husband 8 times, tragically taking his life. When the police arrived, they found Elliot's body. With clear defensive wounds, he tried to fight back, but it wasn't enough. Lee, sitting over her husband's body, confessed to the murder. Ladies and gentlemen, Lee Jennings is charged with murder. It is our burden to prove this to you beyond a reasonable doubt, which we can and will do. The judge will instruct you more on the law later, though I want to take a moment to outline the elements of the crime of murder. First, you must find that Lee Jennings acted purposely and knowingly to cause the death of Elliot Jennings. Second, you must find that Lee Jennings did cause the death of her husband by stabbing. Now let's talk about what you're going to learn today. Today, you will hear a lot of evidence. The prosecution will call Detective Pat Truman to the stand, a seasoned detective assigned to this case. You will hear about the Jennings-Rocky marriage, as we've already spoken about. You'll hear about Lee using her husband for financial support while having an affair with his best friend, Jean. You will unfortunately hear how Elliot Jennings is no longer with us. An autopsy will prove he died due to a result of stab wounds inflicted upon him by his wife. And you will hear about the knife the police found on the scene. The knife was hidden in Morgan Jennings' bedroom, but the knife had Lee's fingerprints on it. And you will hear how Elliot put up one hell of a fight, but it wasn't enough to save his life from his wife's murderous rage. And finally, you will hear how, at the scene of the crime, Lee Jennings confessed to murdering her husband, Elliot. You will likely hear from the defense a slightly different story, one about an allegedly abusive marriage, but you won't hear any concrete facts to back that up. The defense may try to insinuate that Morgan could have killed his stepfather, since the knife was found in his room, but maybe Morgan just hid the knife to protect his mom. Maybe Lee put it in there to throw the cops off her trail. You may hear that Elliot acted out of self-defense, but you will also hear that she refused to give a statement after going into custody. She gave no explanation, no story of self-defense. You will hear a lot of evidence that all points to Lee Jennings murdering her husband. This case truly comes down to three things: disloyalty, disrespect, and a decision. Lee's disloyalty to her husband, Lee's disrespect to her husband, and Lee's decision to murder her husband, Elliot Jennings. After you have seen and heard all of the evidence, I will stand before you again to remind you how Lee Jennings purposely and knowingly stabbed her husband, resulting in his death, and I will ask you to return the appropriate verdict of guilty. Thank you.